No expert could fix the billionaire's jet, until a homeless boy showed up. The morning sun blazed over the private airstrip in Miami, but inside the luxury hangar, tension hung thick in the air. A sleek white Gulfstream jet sat motionless on the tarmac, surrounded by a dozen aviation experts, all scratching their heads in frustration. Standing near the aircraft's open engine panel was Victor Sterling, one of the wealthiest men in America. His perfectly tailored suit probably cost more than most people's cars. His Rolex caught the light as he checked the time for the 100th time that morning. 4 hours, Victor said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. 4 hours, and you're telling me none of you can figure this out? The lead engineer, a man named Robert with 20 years of experience, wiped sweat from his forehead. Mr. Sterling, I've never seen anything like this. The engine should start. Everything checks out on paper. But something's off. Victor's jaw clenched. This wasn't just any flight. In 6 hours, he had a meeting in New York that could make or break a $2 billion deal. His entire empire could shift on whether he made that meeting on time. Get someone else, Victor snapped. I don't care if you have to fly someone in from Boeing headquarters. Fix my jet. A quarter-mile away, beyond the chain-link fence that separated the private airstrip from the outside world, a 16-year-old boy named Danny watched the commotion. Danny's clothes were 3 sizes too big, donated from a church shelter. His sneakers had holes in the soles, held together with duct tape. His dark hair was messy, and a backpack containing everything he owned hung from his thin shoulders. But his eyes were sharp, focused, taking in every detail of the scene before him. Danny had been sleeping under the overpass near the airport for 3 months now. Ever since his father died, and the bank took their house. Ever since the state tried to put him in foster care, and he ran. Ever since his whole world fell apart. His father, Michael Chen, had been an aircraft mechanic. One of the best. Danny had grown up in hangars just like this one, watching his dad work magic on engines that everyone else said were beyond repair. An engine is just a puzzle, Danny, his father used to say, grease on his hands, pride in his eyes. You just gotta listen to it. Really listen. Those memories felt like another lifetime now. Danny squinted at the jet. Even from this distance, he could see the engineers checking the wrong systems. He'd watched them for the past hour, and every instinct his father had taught him was screaming that they were missing something obvious. He knew he should walk away. Keep his head down. Stay invisible like he'd learned to do on the streets. But something pulled at him. Maybe it was his father's voice in his head. Maybe it was the memory of who he used to be, before everything fell apart. Before he could talk himself out of it, Danny was walking toward the security gate. The security guard, a heavy-set man named Frank, looked up from his phone as Danny approached. No loitering, kid. Move along. I need to talk to whoever owns that jet, Danny said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Frank laughed. Right. And I need to talk to the president. Get lost before I call the cops. Please, Danny pressed. I think I know what's wrong with the engine. Now Frank really laughed. You. A street kid? You think you know more than those engineers in there? He gestured toward the hangar where men with advanced degrees and decades of experience were still scratching their heads. Just 5 minutes, Danny pleaded. If I'm wrong, I'll leave and never come back. Kid, you're wasting my time and yours. Those guys in there. They make more in an hour than you'll see in a year. No offense, but you don't belong anywhere near a multi-million-dollar aircraft. Danny's shoulders sagged. He'd expected this. Of course no one would listen to a homeless kid who looked like he hadn't showered in days. Because he hadn't. He was about to turn away when a voice boomed across the tarmac. Let him through. Victor Sterling stood at the hangar entrance, his sharp eyes fixed on Danny. The boy had no way of knowing that Victor had been watching the whole exchange from a distance. Something about the kid's determination reminded Victor of himself, decades ago, before the money and power. When he was just a poor immigrant son with a dream and stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Frank looked shocked. "Mr. Sterling, sir, this is just some homeless." I said let him through. Victor's tone left no room for argument. Danny walked slowly toward the hangar, acutely aware of how out of place he looked. The engineers stopped their work to stare. Some smirked. Others looked offended that their expertise was being questioned by someone who looked like Danny. "You think you know what's wrong with my jet?" Victor asked, his arms crossed. Danny swallowed hard. This close, he could see the engine clearly. And yes, he was even more certain now. "Sir, my father was an aircraft mechanic. He worked on Gulfstream jets for 15 years. He taught me everything." "Was?" Victor's voice softened slightly. "He died last year." A heavy silence fell over the hangar. Some of the smirking stopped. Robert, the lead engineer, stepped forward. "Mr. Sterling, with all due respect, we can't just let some random kid." "I'm not asking your permission, Robert." Victor turned back to Danny. "You get one chance. If you waste my time, you're out. But if you actually know something these experts don't." He left the sentence hanging. Danny nodded and approached the engine. His hands trembled slightly as he reached out, then stopped. Everything his father taught him was flooding back. "Listen first," he whispered to himself. "Always listen first." Danny closed his eyes and placed his hand gently on the engine casing. The engineers exchanged confused glances. One muttered something about voodoo mechanics. But Danny blocked them all out. He was remembering his father's lessons. How Michael would teach him to feel the vibrations, to hear the subtle sounds that told a story. He moved his hand to different sections of the engine. Then he opened his eyes and pulled out his phone, a battered old model with a cracked screen. He opened a note-taking app where he'd saved his father's old maintenance logs and diagrams. "Can someone start the ignition sequence?" Danny asked quietly. Victor nodded to one of the engineers, who reluctantly climbed into the cockpit. The engine sputtered, made a grinding sound, then died. Just like it had been doing all morning. But Danny had heard something. Something the others had missed because they weren't listening for it. "Stop," Danny said. He moved to a specific panel near the turbine housing. "Can I borrow a wrench?" 3/4 inch. Robert looked at Victor, who nodded. Reluctantly, Robert handed over the tool. Danny's hands, despite the trembling from nerves, moved with surprising confidence. He removed a panel that none of the engineers had thought to check. It was an unusual access point, one that wasn't in the standard troubleshooting protocols. But his father had shown him this spot years ago. The old Gulfstreams, Danny, they had this quirk. There's a secondary pressure valve that's hidden. Most mechanics don't even know it exists because it's not in the newer manuals. Danny reached deep into the engine housing, his face pressed close to the metal. His fingers found what they were looking for. He pulled out a small valve component. It was barely damaged, just slightly bent. Almost imperceptible. But it was enough to throw off the entire pressure system. "This," Danny said quietly, holding up the piece. "This is why your engine won't start." "Danny, I'm going to be direct with you. I didn't get where I am by missing opportunities when they present themselves." He leaned forward. "I see something in you. Something rare. You have knowledge, instinct, and a work ethic that most people twice your age don't possess." Danny didn't know what to say. "I also know what it's like to have nothing," Victor continued. "I came to this country with $47 and a suitcase. I worked 3 jobs, slept in my car, ate 1 meal a day. But someone gave me a chance. One chance. And I've never forgotten what that felt like." Through the office window, they could hear the jet engine roar to life. Perfect. Smooth. Fixed. Victor stood and walked to the window. I'm going to make you an offer, Danny. And I want you to think very carefully before you answer. Danny's heart was pounding. I own a private aviation company. 12 jets, 23 helicopters, maintenance contracts with Fortune 500 companies. I'm offering you an apprenticeship. Full-time. You'll work with my best mechanics, learn everything about aviation engineering. I'll pay for your housing, your food, your education. And when you're ready, when you've learned everything you can learn, I'll pay for your college. Full ride. Aerospace engineering, if that's what you want. Danny's vision blurred with tears. He couldn't speak. There's one condition, Victor said, his voice firm but kind. You work hard. Harder than you've ever worked in your life. You honor your father's memory by becoming everything he believed you could be. Can you do that? Danny stood up, his thin frame shaking with emotion. Yes, sir. I promise. Victor extended his hand. Then we have a deal. As they shook hands, Danny felt something he hadn't felt in over a year. Hope. 3 years later, the same hangar bustled with activity. But this time, Danny wasn't watching from behind a fence. He was standing in front of Victor's newest jet, now 19 years old, wearing a clean uniform with his name embroidered on the pocket, Danny Chen, Junior Aviation Engineer. He'd aced his way through a technical certification program. He was enrolled in aerospace engineering at MIT, set to start in the fall. He had an apartment, a car, and most importantly, a future. But he never forgot where he came from. Every Saturday, Danny volunteered at a youth shelter, teaching kids basic mechanical skills. Kids who had nothing. Kids who looked like he used to look, with that same lost expression in their eyes. An engine is just a puzzle, he'd tell them, echoing his father's words. You just gotta listen to it. Really listen. Victor sometimes watched these sessions from a distance, a slight smile on his face. He'd taken a gamble on a homeless kid who everyone else had dismissed. And that gamble had paid off in ways he never expected. Because fixing engines wasn't the real miracle that day. The real miracle was seeing potential where others saw nothing. Offering hope where others saw hopelessness. Giving a chance when it would have been easier to walk away. Danny often thought about that moment at the fence. How close he'd come to walking away. How easy it would have been to believe what everyone told him, that a kid like him didn't belong near a billionaire's jet. But he'd listened to a different voice. His father's voice. The voice that taught him that your circumstances don't define your worth. That knowledge and skill can exist anywhere. That sometimes, the person everyone overlooks is exactly the person everyone needs. On the wall of Danny's apartment hung a photograph. His father, Michael, standing in front of a small plane, grease on his hands, pride in his smile. Next to it hung another photo, Danny's MIT acceptance letter. Between them, he'd placed a small, bent valve. The SV-47 that had changed everything. He kept it as a reminder. That sometimes, the smallest, most overlooked piece is the one that makes the whole machine run. And sometimes, the smallest, most overlooked person is the one who changes everything. Remember, your circumstances are not your destiny. Your knowledge and heart can take you places you never imagined. Never stop believing in yourself, even when the world tells you to give up. Because the next person who gives you a chance might just change your entire life. If this story inspired you, please like this video. Subscribe for more incredible stories. Comment below, what did you think about Danny's story? Have you ever been underestimated like him? Share your thoughts.